Miguel Indurain has always said the leader of the Tour de France on Wednesday night would win the race in Paris. Indurain has kept his lead, but yesterday the great Spaniard was pushed to his limits on his hardest day so far. Has he recovered? The last day in the mountains will have the answer. Hello, well, we've moved to Pau this morning for the last stage in the mountains of this year's Tour de France. The riders are over at nearby Tarbs, facing the final two big climbs. And news reaching us from there that Eric Breukink has hurt a knee and is out of the race. Now, if you were watching last night, you will have seen the first ever Polish stage winner of this year's Tour de France when Zenon Kol has sprinted ahead of Tony Rominger and Miguel Indurain to take the stage. Well, in this morning's papers, Tony Rominger has been particularly scathing about that. He said that Kol shouldn't have even tried to win the stage because he didn't do enough work on the climb. And in fact, it's true, Rominger was the man that did set the pace all of the way to the summit. But what would you do if you saw your chance to win your first ever stage in the Tour de France? I know what I would do, and that was try to win the stage. Anyway, here's James Richardson now to tell us more about Tony Rominger, because he's now poised to win the King of the Mountains title.
Tony Rominger's imminent victory in the King of the Mountains competition is quite an achievement for a man whose summer performances till recently have always been hampered by chronic hay fever. A bout of spring training in the Colorado mountains and the attentions of Dr. Michel Ferrari, though, have seen to that.
I couldn't do nothing. I had this the first 3 years that I have many problems. But in the final, my doctor said when you're happy, it can be. When you're getting older, it's passing like that, and it passed.
At 32, Rominger is something of a late developer in cycling. He's only recently being viewed as a possible big race winner after victories in the last two Tours of Spain. He now enjoys a home in Monte Carlo and a world ranking of #2, but a win in the '93 Tour de France still looks a little out of reach. Yesterday, his constant attacks had Indurain in the most difficulty we've seen this year. But with only 3 seconds one back off the Spaniard, today Rominger will need the biggest break of the Tour so far if he's to stand any chance of challenging Indurain.
Well, thank you, James. And Tony Rominger still hoping to finish second in this year's Tour de France. He's 5 minutes 41 seconds behind Indurain, but very much closer to Alvaro Mejia and Zenon Kol. Bjorn Ries has retained his 5th place overall. And the rollout this morning, Michel Dernisse, a little bit too anxious to make the start because he almost collides here with the race director's car. A long ride away from Tarbes today. In fact, rather surprisingly, it's only the 8th time in race history that the race has visited Tarbes here on the edge of the Pyrenees. And the route they face, the riders now make their way out towards the first big climb of the day, the Col de Tourmalet at 2,115 meters. And then it rolls down and up the climb of the Col d'Aubisque, where Stephen Roche won his first ever stage in the Tour de France. And that takes us to 1,709 meters. Then it's a long, gently undulating run-in to the finish in Pau. And as we come into the town of La Mongie, 5 kilometers from the top of the Col de Tourmalet, Tony Rominger and Claudio Chiappucci are at it again. They're testing Miguel Indurain, and so far on this climb, he hasn't been able to respond to the acceleration of Rominger at all. John Unzaga is the teammate there at the front of Tony Rominger, and here number 159 is Oliveira Rincon, the rider who won on the first day in the Pyrenees, scoring a first ever win for Colombia. Now let's have a look today, Paul, at the face here of Miguel Indurain. He's watched these riders sprint away from him, and at the moment he hasn't caught up.
Well, he hasn't. He's got one teammate with him. Number 6 there was Julian Gorospe. They were just picking up Robert Miller, who was in this group just before, but you can see now the pressure of Unzaga and Tony Rominger. They're going away. The gap is 22 seconds. Rominger has really put in a fantastic effort over the last 2 days to try and crack Indurain, and he cannot respond to these accelerations in the mountains.
There's Tony Rominger riding alongside John Unzaga, who's turning out to be his first lieutenant here in the mountains, and a very good pacemaker indeed.
Well, he said at the start of the Tour, he said, my team is the best team in the world. He was very unfortunate to lose those 2 riders early in the Tour de France, who he'd brought into the Tour de France just for the team time trial, which is why he lost so much time. But the rest of the team in the mountains have been much stronger than the Banesto squad.
Rincon, inspired by his great ride, and Jaskula has come up, and come back has Claudio Chiappucci. It was Chiappucci and Franco Bona who started this move lower down the mountain. Bona went first, Chiappucci joined him, and when Rominger came up, well, he blew away Chiappucci, but Chiappucci, as you can see, has now climbed back up to the side of Rominger, and Jaskula rode away from Indurain as well and came up to this group by himself. Robert Miller at the bottom of our picture here, he was also up in that front group and was in fact dispatched back to this group led by Indurain. And again, the French are not enjoying their Tour de France at all, because Laurent Jalabert, who won the green jersey last year, is out of the race. He's retired this morning on the very, very low slopes of the Col de Tourmalet, clearly not feeling as though he could face up to the two mountains ahead of him today. So he's gone out, so he joins Eric Brookink, who went out before the start this morning. Two big names of previous tours have gone.
Well, Andy Hampson, who was at one time in that group of 7 riders in the lead, has been dropped as well. And the acceleration of Jaskula has actually put Claudio Chiappucci in between the two groups now. He was unable to follow that acceleration.
Just 3 kilometres now to climb to the top of the Col de Tourmalet, and Jaskula doing more than his fair share today, now willing to help out. They're sensing at last they're climbing with the freedom of climbers, without the annoying appearance of Miguel Indurain sitting there, number 2, number 3 position in that imposing yellow jersey. For once and for the first time in this year's Tour de France, he is not with these riders. It might be, Paul, that he was hurt yesterday and he's taking a gamble today because it's a long, flat run into the finish.
Well, I don't think he will try and panic himself, and he's tried. He really had to pull a lot out of the bottle yesterday to keep in contact with Tony Rominger. This climb is a long, hard climb, and he obviously isn't going to panic because there are over 70 kilometres to go to the finish from the top of the Col de l'Aubisque, and he doesn't want to go into the red zone too quickly, so he's going to let Rominger play. The gap at the moment is 35 seconds, which is quite easily to be picked up on the descent.
And this is Claudio, as Paul has just said, dispatched from the front group. He does yo-yo around this year, Paul. 1 minute he's up there, next minute he's back in the chase group, and I'm quite sure we'll see him back in the lead group later. And Rominger and Jaskula now seem to be making the decision themselves here. They've got rid of Rincon, and they've also got rid of Unzaga, who made such great running.
Well, just 2 riders in front now. Unzaga and Rincon have just been dropped, and this is quite an incredible move because these 2 riders are exceptional rouleurs, as they call them in France. They're very good riders on the flat, good time trialists. If they can get over the top together, it's going to put a lot of pressure on Miguel Indurain to try and come back to them.
And it is indeed another unhappy day for Miguel at the moment. His face there is a grimace. Mejia following. Mejia is going to lose that 2nd place overall for sure, I think, because he's never attacked in the mountains, which is his strong point. He won't ride a good time trial if he rides like he did the other week in the time trial midway through the race, which was a bad one, and that will probably cost him 2nd overall. And in fact, Jaskula and Rominger are very conscious of the inability to ride the time trial of Mejia. Lovely crowd up here. It's very early morning. Local time here is, well, it's just after midday now here in France. And I should imagine when the crowd came up this morning, it was bitterly cold, but the weather has warmed a little bit as Jaskula, perhaps by way of reminding Rominger that he doesn't just follow wheels as well as win stages, he can also share in the pacemaking, because they've certainly teamed together today.
And once they go over the top and start the descent, the first part, as I explained, is very tricky. Then it's a very good descent down to the bottom of the Col de l'Aubisque, and the 2 of them, I'm sure, will work perfectly together and put even more pressure onto Miguel Indurain.
And it's 40 seconds now back to Miguel Indurain. He's conceded the most time he's ever conceded on a mountain in this year's race. The trouble is, he's taking a gamble that he can come back on the flatter roads, and it's now up to these 2 to try and keep the rhythm going.
Well, that's a big gamble to take when there are only 3 or 4 days left to go in the Tour de France, and I'm amazed to see that he's cracked. But I could see the telltale signs on his face yesterday and the day before the rest day. The first time I've ever seen him grimacing in pain in the mountains in the Tour de France, and it really is a fantastic finale to this year's Tour.
I would agree entirely. 17 kilometres, we caught a quick glimpse there of the caption. 17 kilometres the climb, which is just over 10 miles. Average gradient of around 7%, so it's a really hard, steady, steep climb. And in fact, it is Jaskula who has continually made the pace as we've come up towards now the summit of the Col de Tourmalet. 2,150 metres down the slope a little bit. We've got Rincon and Gonzaga, but they're dropping away from it now. And another superb crowd here. Yesterday, coming off the top of the Pla d'Day, the cars were coming down until midnight, and that was some 7 hours after the Tour de France finished there. There were that many people up the mountain. Back to the top now of the Col de Tourmalet. Tony Rominger spins clear, and up comes the Daily News. Neither of them wanted to read on the way down, so it can't be that cold out there, Paul. But Rominger taking the lead over Zenon Jaskula for the points, and now he's more or less making the King of the Mountains competition his. Oh, that's why he didn't want the newspaper. He's carrying a racing cape today as he starts the long descent. So Rominger, Jaskula, Rincon, Gonzaga are the next two riders up, and Gonzaga is going to do what his team leader can do, and that's win the sprint. Oh, I've spoken too soon. I've spoken too soon, because Rincon, I don't know what he did there, but he almost pushed Gonzaga out of the way. He goes over in third place. And up comes the main field. Franco Bona just in front of them. Claudio Chiappucci here. And look at the time gap, Paul, 50 seconds. The yellow jersey now on the defensive for the first time in this year's Tour de France. Miguel Indurain goes over the top of the Col de Tourmalet, 50 seconds behind the leaders on the road today. And one of those leaders is Tony Rominger, the King of the Mountains. We'll take a short break. And welcome back. Well, the situation we saw there on the Col de Tourmalet has changed now as the riders struggle towards the top of the Col d'Aubisque. Indurain caught up with Tony Rominger, and with it came a small group. And now Claudio Chiappucci has attacked again. The rider who fell back to the Indurain group on the Tourmalet. You can't keep him down, can you? Here he is now heading this charge. John Gonzaga is the rider in the middle, and Massimo Garotto is the rider at the back. Three riders in the lead. The last time check was 4 minutes and 15 seconds.
Superb move there, really, by Miguel Indurain on the Tourmalet. He didn't panic at all as Tony Rominger attacked him there, and he waited, and he came back so easily on the descent. The fact that he's got that little bit of extra weight must have rocketed him down the mountain.
There's Indurain taking a drink, and off goes the feeding bottle as a souvenir. And it is Gerard Rouet who is holding the pace high at the front of a group which is getting steadily larger here on the climb of the Aubisque. On the start line this morning, 137 starters, as we told you at the beginning of the show. Not starting this morning, Erik Breukink, the champion of Holland, and getting off his bike on the way, the green jersey winner of the Tour last year, Laurent Jalabert, has abandoned. So in all now, we've lost 44 riders in this year's Tour. 31.5 kilometres now so far today, but it's been mostly uphill. And the Tour dipping inside a record speed for the first time today. It's now averaging 38.898 kilometres an hour since we started out from the Vendée region. Indurain in yellow, Rominger in the polka dot, and the green jersey, Jamaluddin Abdou-Japarov.
Yes, I think Jamaluddin Abdou-Japarov is going to be a very happy man when he gets to the top of the Aubisque, because surely he'll just be able to see the Eiffel Tower of Paris on the horizon there.
And moving up to the leaders again as the summit approaches at the top of the Col d'Aubisque. Girotto has done no work to contribute to this breakaway since the climb started. He always surprises how he gets into these little breakaways on the climbs. He's the sort of man you never see as a great climber, yet he gets into the decisive moves on the mountains time after time again in the Tour. And there's an enormous crowd awaiting to say au revoir to the Tour in the Pyrenees this year. And the Benesto have readdressed the situation and have got the main part of the race at least under control. Nobody up front is going to affect Miguel Indurain. And I would think that the chase will be taken up by other riders once they get down onto the flatter roads. And it looks as though, in fact, Rouet is asking a teammate there, Grospe, I think it was, to slow it down, Paul.
He was. He just wanted to keep setting the tempo himself. He said, look, there's no panic at the moment. This is the tempo we want to set out. Just stay alongside me and I'll ride up to the top. These are the riders who are just going to come over the top of the climb now. Chiappucci is an incredible man. He fought all the way up the Col de Tourmalet. He got caught by the yellow jersey group, as soon as it all came back together, he went away again.
And he's going over the top, but he's gone over the top alongside John Unzaga and Girotto. And in fact, they're just coming up to the top here, so Chiappucci gets the prize at the top of the climb, and the average speed is moving up a little bit now, 32.6. They've moved after having 1 and 2 rapid descents, and the gap to the chasing group is still around 4 minutes and 55 seconds. That was the last time check we were given, and it looks as though Rouet has got control of the front of the big field again. And here are the 3 leaders on the way down the very narrow twisting road of the Col d'Aubisque. And Girotto prefers, it seems, to descend quite quickly. He's gone up to the front, Chiappucci in the middle, and John Unzaga at the back here.
Again, typical of many of the Pyrenean descents. You can see how the road is rutted in the corners, and these roads here are so dangerous because there's a very thick amount of gravel on the surface, and it really is dangerous going around the corners because that's when you can lose the back wheel and you're straight into one of these rock faces. But Girotto doesn't seem to be worried about that at the moment, and he's setting the pace all the way down.
And here's the field now coming up, while the 3 leaders are already a long way down the Col d'Aubisque, making a run for the finishing line in Pau. Gerard Rouet continues to set the pace on the climb. Oliveira Rincon in that mauve jersey. There's Alvaro Mejia, 37, still second overall. But he's going to have to fight for that place now because the mountains are behind, and that should have been his strong point, as the main field, generally regrouped, now goes over the top of the Col d'Aubisque. Goodbye to the Pyrenees, and 5 minutes 19 seconds the gap to the 3 leaders. Now they face the long descent. Here we go back to the 3 leaders again. They're a long way down the Col already, and it's all of the time Girotto who's setting the pace. And a long way behind, but still riding well within the time limit, the group of riders they refer to as the Autobus. This is the group that will contain the sprinters, and they're actually reaching out for the newspapers as well for the chilly run off the top of the Col d'Aubisque. The 3 leaders, though, are down the mountain now and trying to strike for home. It's a long way, and John Unzaga seemingly willing to work with the other 2, and so there's a chance yet they'll make it to the finish in Pau before the field. And so the charge down the mountain now. They're looking for 5 minutes, this group, containing Miguel Indurain. And the Ariosto rider, Rolf Yerman, is the man driving the charge. And it seems that the Ariostos would like to bring this race back together again, and so they could produce perhaps the winner from the sprint. These are the 3 leaders now on the outskirts of Pau. It's been a long run off the mountains at 5 kilometers to go. So the 3 leaders are now just under the 5 kilometers banner here on this final day in the mountains in the Tour de France. And the men that made a run for it as the Col d'Aubisque was starting, Claudio Chiappucci, Massimo Girotto and John Unzaga, they've gambled, they've gone for it, and they've kept their lead. At one stage the lead was up to 5.5 minutes, and then the Ariosto team started the chase down because Claudio Chiappucci here endangered the 5th place overall of their man Bjorn Ries from Denmark. They seem to have at least slowed down the effect here because they have caught them back by a couple of minutes. They've stopped Chiappucci claiming that 5th place overall, but Andy Hampston's 6th place overall is most definitely still in danger, and Hampston on the Motorola team.
Been a great job over the last few kilometers by the Ariosto team, but they just haven't managed to bring it down. They broke the back of it to begin with by bringing it back from 5 minutes to 3 minutes, and now over the last few kilometers it's just been a matter of seconds at a time that the breakaway has been reeled in.
I think what they've done, Paul, is at least they have saved the 5th place of Bjorn Ries, because they've pulled back the required time gap to keep Chiappucci away from Ries in 5th place. But even so, this young man is taking time out of Ries, and he might well get it back in the next couple of days, yet this tour is not over yet. There's the kite and 1 kilometer to go, and I think this has got to be the biggest crowd I can remember here in the city of Pau. For the 51st time the Tour de France has come here.
It's an incredible crowd that has turned out. Now is the time, as we've gone under the red kite, that the tactics are going to start. Massimo Girotto has waited as long as possible there to recuperate before we come up to the last 400 or 500 meters, which is when the sprint is going to start. He waited for Chiappucci to make all the effort, And now Chiappucci has got the best place at the moment, but I feel sure that he'll move to the front as we get nearer the 500 metre to go. And you can see now is the time when they're trying to decide who is going to win the stage.
And Girotto doesn't want the first position. He doesn't know where they are. That's why he's riding tight on the left to make them attack him on his right shoulder. Now he's got the wheel of John Unzaga, and Chiappucci quite clearly thinking of a stage victory. 400 metres to go, and Girotto fears Chiappucci most. He's trying to keep the pace reasonable. At the same time, he doesn't want to make the effort yet. At 300 to go, it's Unzaga who's gone. And that's what, in fact, Girotto wanted. He's got the wheel of John Unzaga, but John Unzaga has got some speed, and I'm not too sure whether Girotto can go, but he goes now. Massimo Girotto on the left, Chiappucci comes on the right. It's going to be very, very close on the line, but I think on the line, Chiappucci has got it. Girotto looks across at him, his mouth was wide open, he doesn't believe it. But Claudio Chiappucci was given the stage victory. As we switch down the road, it looks like Bjorn Ries is here and clear.
Well, that was a superb move, and that's one that I definitely would not have been waiting for, and I think that is probably how he managed to catch everybody unawares. The team has done an incredible job over the last 20-30 kilometres for him. They've chased down that group, they've brought it down to as little as possible. Now it's going to be under 1.5 minutes on the line, and he slipped away from everybody. This is Ekimov coming up to take 4th place.
And so Ries gets 4th place on the stage, 1 minute and 17 seconds down as Vyacheslav Yekimov comes home too. He will take the 5th place on the stage today, 1 minute and 24 back, and all of the riders in this big chase group now come in today with the cheer you can probably hear reserved for the rider who should now go on to win the Tour de France, Miguel Indurain. The breakaway surviving today to sprint out the £5,000 first prize, and Claudio Chiappucci was the man that won it. Massimo Girotto 2nd, John Unzaga 3rd. Bjorn Ries had to break away in the end to make sure he kept his 5th place overall. He finished 4th, 1 minute and 17 seconds later, and Vyacheslav Yekimov led home the main field, or what was left of them, 1 minute and 21 seconds off the front of the race today. I'm not surprised that Claudio Chiappucci is happy tonight, because he's again a stage winner in this Tour de France, and no way can Tony Rominger say he didn't earn that today. Overall, no change at all in the top 5 riders, but there was a change in the 6th place. That breakaway was not in vain for Claudio Chiappucci. He climbs over Andy Hampsten of America, but the yellow jersey stays firmly on the shoulders of Miguel Indurain again tonight, and he'll feel a very relieved man that the mountains are now behind him. Just time left to tell you now that all of the results on today's stage of the Tour de France are on page 350 on Portel as usual. Now, our competition this Sunday, we'd like you to name the winner of the stage onto the Champs-Élysées. When you think you know it, ring this telephone number. It is 0839 444554 with your selection. If you're right, you're in the hat, and the winner will receive the yellow jersey of, I suspect, Miguel Indurain, signed by him this Sunday, and also the man who wins the final stage. An additional prize, a limited edition print of the 1950 Tour of Lombardy from an original painting by Len Goff, and that really will be something to treasure as well. Today, the race belongs to the man they call the gadfly of the Tour, Claudio Chiappucci. He's now proved to us he can sprint as well as climb. Until we're on the road tomorrow to Bordeaux, from Paul Sherwin, James Richardson, and me, Phil Liggett, goodbye.
And don't forget, tomorrow evening's programme is half an hour earlier at 8 o'clock.